Let's get today's session started. It's my pleasure to have you all here for today's roundtable, topic being the urban farmer. So we'll be talking a little bit about who's farming our food in urban areas, how do we combine traditional farming practices and culture with modern approaches to make urban farming profitable and sustainable, and how can we encourage young people to become next generation farmers. So today, and I'll briefly hand over in a minute to him, but this Topical Roundtable is hosted by Henry Gordon-Smith, who's the founder and CEO of Agritecture. Henry is an acknowledged global thought leader in the accelerating vertical and urban agriculture industry, has facilitated, moderated, and spoken at sustainably driven forums and events worldwide, including the TFF summits. He'll be joined by a panel of farmers, founders, vertical farming pioneers from his own and the TFF network. And we'll be learning from them about their insights into the urban farming business and what the future holds for the next generation of farmers. But before I'll hand over, I'll say that with Thought for Food, we have a whole lot of these live sessions coming up and that we're organizing. Later this week on Thursday, we have How to Spot Hype in a Christine and Guest session. And next week, we're going very much away from indoor ag into regenerative agriculture and talking about breaking assumptions about regenerative agriculture. To see what sessions are coming up, I am putting the link in the chat right now so that you can go on there, ideally after the session, because you want to stay here to hear about all the wonderful things that our panel will share. And with that, Henry, over to you, and have a wonderful session.
Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. I'm Henry, as I was introduced, and I work at Agritecture. Agritecture is about empowering others, especially entrepreneurs, to develop urban farms all around the world. And so I want to wish you all a happy June. The world is still crazy, but the world still needs food. So we're going to dive into that, and we have an amazing panel here full of urban farmers on the ground doing this amazing work. So to begin with, we're going to go through some introductions. So I will just call off one of our panelists and I'll ask you to introduce yourself. Please tell us, remind us of your name, what you do, and where you're located, because we have a pretty global panel today. So let's start off with you today, Alyssa. Just unmute and tell us those answers.
Awesome. Good morning, everybody. Well, good afternoon. We have people from all over the world. It's morning time for me. I'm currently in St. Louis, Missouri. And I am a bit different in the fact that I'm not a farmer and I don't work exclusively in the urban agriculture space, but kind of a bit more broad. I've taken the past year to travel and see different farms, work on different types of farms, livestock operations, urban farms, small permaculture vegetable farms. I spent the past 6 months in New Zealand before I got brought back to the US due to everything going on with COVID. And I have really enjoyed taking the past year after working at an ag tech startup called Farmers Business Network for the previous 3 years before then. And I'm excited to also learn a bit more on the urban ag space as I kind of work throughout the whole industry, but excited to share any insights that I can.
Awesome, thank you so much. So just a reminder to our audience, you can ask us questions using the chat function. That's how I'm going to see it, and I'll try to get to them as much as we can as we get through the main questions today. So let's move from the United States to Australia, to my dear friend Lydia. How are you doing, Lydia? Introduce yourself, please.
Hi. Yeah, good night from here. It's like 11 p.m. here, and I took off tomorrow because it's a little late for a farmer. Yeah, so I'm Lydia, and I'm from the US, actually in Missouri, where Alyssa is from. I'm from southern Missouri. And then, started farming in Kansas City, Missouri, and moved to New York City, which is where I met Henry, and then moved upstate. And now, after traveling some and also visiting some different farms around the world, now I'm farming in Australia. So I do diversified vegetable farming and focus on organic production with regenerative practices. And for the last several years, this is now my 4th season, focusing on no-till production, my 8th season of farming. Something that I've been learning about here in Australia is honoring the folks whose land that we're on. So I wrote down, I just wanted to To just honor the folks that were first farming here on the land that I'm now farming in Australia, and it's the Wurundjeri people, and that's a little bit outside of Melbourne in what's called Keilor. And something that they just practice here is a formal paying of my respects to the elders, past and present, and the Aboriginal elders of other communities who originally participated in the agriculture and economic activity on this land. Also recognizing the Osage tribes and Missouri and Shawnee people, where I first learned to farm, and the Iroquois people in New York. So.
Thank you so much for that, Lydia. I really appreciate it. So I'm calling you from Oman, Muscat, Oman. I was here on a business trip and I've had 6 canceled flights. So I think I'm officially a Corona refugee. And we're gonna talk to my colleague and friend, Graham Dunling, who's actually only 4 hours drive away in Dubai. Graham, how are you doing? Can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, hiya Henry, hiya everybody. My name's Graham Dunling. I'm a 4th generation grower. Proud to say my son is joining the business. He's becoming the 5th generation of the family. At the moment, I'm the CEO of Un's Farms in Dubai. Henry's visited us, and I think it's fair to say he was pleasantly surprised how big it was.
Delicious. My taste buds were blown away.
I've always produce quality gourmet products, and that's what we're trying to do at Un's Farms. We're one of the biggest indoor vertical farms in the region. We're expanding. We've changed a lot in the last 3 months, and we'll change a lot more in the next 6 months. So that's me. I've been in commercial growing all my life.
Thank you so much, Graham. So let's go over to the Big Apple, New York City, and David Goldstein. How are you doing, David?
Hi, everyone. I'm doing well. Thank you, Henry. My name is David Goldstein. I am the Senior Farm Operations Manager with a nonprofit called Teams for Food Justice. And normally, we operate hydroponic farms in public schools around New York City and in a few other cities in the US coming soon. However, since the shutdown, when the school shut down, we've had to shut down most of our farms. And so we've done a bit of a pivot to from food production to food procurement for the food desert communities that we serve. So it's a very strange time, but we're hoping to reopen our farms in the near future.
As they say in the Middle East, inshallah. So let's go over to Belgium and my dear friend Alexandre. How are you doing? Comment ça va?
Va très bien.
I hear you're drowning in honey. You told us earlier you've got too much honey.
Hello, everybody. Yeah, I'm an urban beekeeper, and with the good weather and the high temperature, I have a lot of honey here in Brussels. I have a lot of to do with bees, but I have also a lot of to do about my other business. I'm doing consulting like Henry in New York, but I'm doing the same in Belgium and in other countries next to Belgium. I have a very bad English, but I'm doing consulting in French, so it's not a problem. And I'm very glad to be here with you, and thank you for that.
Thank you so much for being here. We understand you. You're doing fantastic. So now let's go over back to the United States and my dear friend Maurice Small from Atlanta. How are you doing, Maurice?
Hi, everybody. I'm doing well. Thank you so much.
You're enjoying the sunshine, and is that your farm that we're looking into right now, or one of your gardens? I love it.
This is one of our greenhouses, yeah.
Nice. So tell us about yourself.
Well, I've been doing the urban ag piece for about 30 years now, and started off in Cleveland, Ohio, and moved to Raleigh, and then moved to Atlanta about 4 years ago. So we've been in the south part of the United States for about 9 years now. And life is pretty good because we always have food, we always have fruits and vegetables, we always have our herbs. And we've been supporting farmers, young farmers, beginning emerging into the field for about 20 years now, that urban ag has begun to become this trend. And by supporting young farmers, we're able to support cities and able to support hospital systems and universities and schools. Planting urban forests, mycelium in the woods, all these things. Urban ag is fun, and I'm here to talk about it with y'all.
Awesome, thank you so much. So we might have one more person join in a bit, but those are our panelists. And so let's start to dive in here. So Graham, you mentioned that you're multiple generations of farming. So I want to start with you first. The question is, how has agriculture changed over the past 50 years? And what are the challenges that farmers, specifically urban farmers, are facing that are different from the challenges of the past? And what are some of the challenges that are the same?
I thought it was only an hour and a half, so we're extending it, are we? Well, how has it changed? Well, when I first started, I used to plant lettuces out with 2 canes and a piece of string and a dibbler and into soil, straight from the seeding tray, and then wait for it to grow. So then come along the magic of soil blocks and pelleted seed. So, you know, I mean, we go way back. So absolute massive changes over the last 50 years, but very quick changes. I mean, I used to grow in Dutch light greenhouses, and then we moved from Dutch light to Venlo greenhouses, then from the Venlos to the modern type of what we have now. I mean, we used to have to open all the ventilation one at a time. Then it was on a wire and like a pulley. Then it got to automation. Then you got to climate control and controlling it by temperature, not just by walking in a greenhouse and going, wow, it's warm in here. So, you know, it's changed dramatically. I mean, we used to have to, I'm still an old school grower. I mean, people are amazed. I walk into a grow area, I can tell the different temperatures. I walk around and within a 9-foot height, I can sort of, this is the temperature, this is the temperature. I can feel the different temperatures, but that's what I've grown up with. You know, so it hasn't changed dramatically. It's now in the situation where you can grow any crop you like, anywhere you want in the world. It's a matter of controlling the regimes correctly. And the small things matter.
Oh, sorry, go ahead. I just want to ask about your son. You said you've converted your son into agriculture, which is awesome. It's very exciting. So is he also using indoor farming technologies? Is he doing more greenhouse or, you know?
My son worked with me in 2006 at FDM Herbs, which stood for Fresh Dried and Micro. We was growing micro herbs for all the top chefs in England back in 2006. That's where I learned quality, taste, texture with Anton Mossivan, Sat Baines, Glyn Fennell, all the top chefs of the day and still around now. So it was a good learning curve. And my son was working with me then. What's happened with the coronavirus, he turned around and he said, can't get any good salads. I see where you're coming from. I really need to start and get back into the industry because the only good salad I can get is one that I grow or that you've grown. And I'm not coming to Dubai for a salad. So we're in
silver lining there.
Yeah, so he's in the process of starting a warehouse in the UK with a vertical grow system. And the one advantage he's got is I know every company in the world in horticulture. So, you know, getting people like Preva, Hugendorn, Bosman Van Zyl, you name them, to work with him isn't a problem. So he's got a good start, shall we say.
He's got a good start. Well, we wish him the best, and we're going to be watching closely to see what impact he makes, knowing what you've been able to do. So let's move over to you, Lydia. Lydia, you recognized our ancestors and basically some of the originals that took care of our land. You know, one of the things that I find fascinating is I was contacted by some indigenous communities in the northern parts of Canada, and they said, we need to kind of get engaged in vertical farming. We have some obesity issues. We have difficult weather, but yet we want to kind of maintain the original practices because actually before the white people arrived, we actually were able to feed ourselves year round without any controlled environments. So, what's changed? I mean, obviously you've looked at the past. Can you talk a little bit about that and what's changed since then and what's similar as far as kind of from the farmer perspective?
Yeah, for sure. Something that when Graham was speaking and when I was thinking about this question that I thought about is my heritage of farming, that I call myself a regeneration farmer because it only has skipped one generation. So for many young people my age that are getting into food production and urban ag, we have grandparents that were producing either their own food or farming for people. And my grandfather wasn't doing it in an urban area. He was doing it on his family's land, and then he did it for his own family's well-being. And it was just in his bones when to plant things, when to pick things, how to do it. I've like begged my grandmother to give me like crop plans, but he didn't have Excel at that time, and he wasn't worried about how much this was producing versus this variety. He was just doing what, like Graham spoke about, what felt right. And so I think I do take that knowledge and I hope to be that connected with the land. I also think about how on the way to market, like every week when I was running my own farm business, I was calling my mom and just lamenting and saying like, small scale young farmers have to do so much. We have to do the food production, which I'm trying to learn, having only, baby years experience. Like after 8 years, I've only done some things 8 times and I'm just always learning how much I have to learn. It's like when I hear Maurice say 30 years, I'm like, oh my goodness, please just teach me everything. But we have to do the production and then we're having to do the marketing. We're having to do the connecting with the chefs, with the market. We're having to do the processing and the distribution. And I really believe in localizing all of those aspects. I also never want to sugarcoat it and be like, oh, it's easy. So in a way, I think something that's changed is that in a world of social media, sometimes farming and food production can be glamorized and we can just see the easy parts of it. And I hope that that can lead to sustainable change for farmers, that it can move towards the recognition of how hard people are working and the recognition of how essential and necessary this work is. And I really do think it is moving towards that. So I guess in one way it's like something so great, and it's one of the biggest challenges. It's just the amount of work that small scale farmers are having to do.
Thank you so much, Lydia. So let's go over to the United States. Maurice, the United States is suffering in so many ways right now, but certainly people of color are especially suffering. And there's obviously a history of people of color growing our food around the world, but especially the United States. I'm sorry to call you out in this way, but can you talk about that a little bit? What's the role of people of color in our agricultural system in the past and in the present today?
Well, I don't mind the truth, and the truth is right in front of our face every day, because people of color grow our food, harvest our food, package our food, deliver our food, and to overlook the brown hands that take care of us, sustain us every day, is a misnomer. And here in Atlanta, it's a wonderful blend of everyone growing food. Other parts of the region, it's either black or it's white. And some parts of the country, as we know, it's heavily Latinx. We have to look at the whole picture as being holistic, and we can't just look at a group. We have to look at all of us. On the inside, we're all the same. And because of societal norms and colonialism, we have begun to, for thousands of years, look at others as being less than, whereas the others now, especially here in America, have become the necessary ones. And with all the shortages that are proposed to come up with the meat packing plants and all the shortages of the fruit pickers in Scotland and all the shortages. These are people from other countries that are on the low part of the pole. We need to respect everyone. And here in Atlanta, we're trying very hard to join forces with all the farmers, all the other farmers, so that we can all be on one page, one accord, and begin to feed everyone holistically. Because the earth listens and the earth produces what it gets back from us. We have to input love, and we have to input understanding, and we have to input all these pieces. We can't overlook what's happened to people of color around the world. At the same time, we have to begin the dialogue and reconcile the differences, because there's a lot of hurt and the earth feels the hurt. We have to begin to discuss it, because if we don't and we overlook it like we have been, that's it.
Wise words there. And I'm just excited to hear all these diversity of perspectives already, just from different parts of the world. So what I'm going to do is actually I'm going to dive into some of the audience questions. We've got some good ones coming in, and I'm going to continue to talk to our panelists based on who I think the best fit is for some of those questions. If any panelists want to dive in, you can just also say it in the chat, or just, just speak your truth, I guess. So let's move over to you, David. One of the questions we got in the chat, and this is a big one in urban agriculture, is, there's so many people in the world that are suffering, and even now with COVID-19, more are being pushed into poverty. But even in the developed world, if we look at a place like New York City, as you and I know, and Teens for Food Justice knows, there are young people, older people in poverty on a daily basis, even today in 2020. But the question is, can urban agriculture really have an impact on poverty, or is it just something for the rich?
Short answer, yes. Longer answer, I see the goal of urban agriculture as the ability for an urban space to be able to feed itself. So to that end, that means every member of the population of that urban setting ought to be able to have the resources in their community to be able to feed themselves. And so the group that I'm with right now, the nonprofit Teens for Food Justice, we are serving what are called food desert communities, which are pockets within the greater New York area that where there's very limited access to fresh produce. So we are partnering with local community groups. We're going into their schools. We work with Title I public schools, which are schools in which there is a very high percentage of the students on a food assistance program. But I mean, that's not unique to New York City. There's food insecurity all around the world. So this is not a unique issue that we're dealing with. But in an urban context, I think it's important to build up the infrastructure to allow the populace to be able to feed itself, so that in times of crisis, when supply chains are disrupted, when people are on lockdown, as we're seeing right now, we're not left in the dark. We're not stuck without food. We're not disconnected from our production sources. I think the ultimate goal is to bring that source of production closer to the point of consumption, so that you're eliminating food miles, you're increasing food security, you're increasing the nutritional value of that food that has not been shipped thousands of miles in the dark for days. So there's myriad benefits of growing your own. And then the secondary benefits are the legacy learning, the generational learning that we were all just talking about. Passing on that knowledge and the ability to nourish yourself in your community.
Excellent. I mean, we have to have a percentage of the population, and if the population lives in the city, a percentage of that population has to know how to grow food, to teach others to grow the food we need, and to actually help people value the food we eat. That's one of the things that Teens for Justice is doing. But also a percentage of the space in the city needs also to be for food, because if we don't value the physical assets around us as productive, we're not really demonstrating that we value the food that nature or technology and nature is providing for us. So let's move over to Belgium. Alexander, this is a question we got from the audience, and I think you'd be a great person for this because of the variety of projects you work on. So the question is, how do you choose your site for your urban farm, and what are some of the things you would consider when choosing your site?
Oh, huge questions. You have to choose a site with good condition for growing plants or for growing what you want to do. This is the basis. And if you don't have, you have to use some tricks or some technologies to improve the environment, like urban farming, like indoor farming. And when you have that, you have to be in the good context with clients and people around that can buy your production or buy your services. And if you don't, it's not a good site, because you have very nice plans, but nobody to buy them, or to share the experience, or to buy the services. It's like this, and you need to have a site with very good security, not only against very bad people, but security in terms of you can improve you can build a very strong project in a long time, not only for 1 year or 2 years. Urban farming is not a play that you can start and ending and etc. You need very good contract with your the propriétaire, the owner of the land or of the place. But in theory, you can start an urban farming project like everywhere. I have online helped him to build a farm on the roof, because the roof it's not strong enough at limits. But if you have some facilities next to your building on the ground, everybody can imagine build urban farming projects. It will be only different if you are in the desert or inside of the city or around the city, in the ground, on the rooftop, etc. I hope I'm clear.
Thank you. No, that's very clear. And I saw you put in the chat some Instagram about some of the work you're doing. So check that out. Alexander has a range of projects involving circular economy, real estate development, bees. He even makes beer from some of the products. So there's really like a lot of variety to look at there, and some attractive pictures. So Alyssa, let's go over to you. Now, I know these aren't one of the prepared questions, so work with me here. I think I'm going to ask you this one. What is the role of sharing and collaborating in the urban farming industry or in the agriculture industry? I know that you haven't just done urban farming. And how do you do it? And I guess what's your message to other people that why they shouldn't do it?
Yeah, I mean, so coming from a background of, so my family, my grandparents, similar to Lydia, my grandparents were farmers in Missouri and grew up on a very diversified farming operation. And I've had that conversation with my grandma of, you know, why she chose to leave the farm. She ultimately left Southeast Missouri and came to St. Louis. And I've had that conversation a lot, and I hadn't lived in Missouri for the past 8 years. And I'm currently here on the land where my grandparents grew up or very near, and have done a lot of thinking about how times have changed and what looks different on farms today than before. And a lot of that is also looking at the connectivity between different farms and the connectivity that technology brings to the table. I think one of the benefits that technology brings is the opportunity to have that collaboration. You know, from coming from a larger scale side, when you're on large row crop farms, you're gathering an abundance of data on yield data, planting data, different varieties, whatever it may be, and there's the opportunity to collaborate in that way. And one of the things I've been focusing on over the past year is how do we take that kind of large scale data sharing model and bring it to smaller farms, to diversified vegetable farms, to vertical agriculture, to urban ag. And I think a lot of that comes from the connectivity in social media, the connectivity of different groups bringing together. And so I see a lot of organizations like Thought for Food, like, you know, different organizations and nonprofits in different cities coming together and sharing that. And it's also just going back to what Lydia said about she's only had 8 years as a farmer. And for most farmers, a lot of older generation farmers have like 40 years. You know, there's that book by Warren Buffett called 40, I think it's called 40 Chances, where you learn year over year, and you're used to having both your ancestral knowledge as well as your own knowledge and building upon. And that's part of why, especially with young farmers or farmers that are getting back into farming when maybe previous generations did in their family, you kind of have to have that collaboration. And so I see it as a very collaborative environment and a necessity, because you can only learn so much, you know, every year. So you have to build upon the knowledge of different people.
So, I mean, follow-up question, okay? Because, you know, historically, history and knowledge was passed on verbally through storytelling. Then it was put onto paper. Now it's on the internet and social media and Zoom, which we all love and hate at the same time. But agriculture is still extremely difficult. Agriculture isn't something you can learn overnight. Alyssa, can farmers learn how to farm faster in 2020 than they could in 1920 or 1820 or 1020?
Yes and no. And Grandma, I'll let you in a moment, but it's, you know, an interesting thing of like, I've done some work helping farmers in Nebraska with growing yellow field peas. And, you know, I came from the desk job side of it, you know, doing a ton of agronomic research. I can learn online all I want about when you should plant peas, what type of nutrition it needs, where in the rotation it can go. But ultimately, if I were told to go out into the field and plant yellow field peas, I probably wouldn't have any idea what to do, even though by the book I knew what to do. So there's a certain level of this knowledge that you can only get so much from the internet and the learning. And maybe that's kind of what Graham has to add on to this, of there's a lot of reading that you can do and a lot of understanding you can do from having, you know, a desk job or reading online, but there's really only so much that you can learn without getting your hands dirty and like really understanding what's happening on the ground.
Thank you. Graham?
Well, my granddad always used to say, those that can do, those that can't teach. And that's what I was going to say. It's so easy to go on the internet and read something and try, and you sow a seed and you wait 40 days and you have a head of lettuce. But like Morris will say, you know, it's what you do in between those few days. You germinate the seed, fine. That you sow the seed and you wait for the germination. You've 2 days, 3 days, 10 days, depending on the variety. Then you've got your seedling stage, your nursery stage. Again, not too much of an issue, but it's what you do from your nursery stage to either the baby leaf or the whole head, or if you're growing tomatoes, there's so many very small variables that you learn by being hands-on. You can change the feed, you can change the temperature, you can change the CO2 levels, or in my case I can, because I'm in indoor warehouse growing. I can give you, even though I'm in 50-degree daytime temperature, I could be at 8 degrees if I wanted. So I could start a strawberry crop and I could give it 8 or 9 degrees, and I could make it a strawberry nighttime in the middle of Dubai sunshine, you know, so it could be 50 degrees in daylight outside, but in my warehouse it could be 9 or 10 degrees and it could be nighttime. So, you know, but again, it's down to the varieties that you grow for the texture and the flavour. I mean, how many heads of lettuce are there? Go on, there must be 2, 3, 4,000 different varieties of lettuce. There's summer varieties, there's winter varieties, you know, all give you a different shape, a different colour, a different taste, a different texture. You can increase the moisture content of a head of lettuce. It sounds so stupid, But you've tasted our salads, Henry. You know, I always said my salads I grow like my granddad used to grow, with love, with care, with attention to detail, and going for flavour. I'd sooner grow 100 kilos of beautiful tasting salad than 400 kilos of crap. Nobody wants to eat crap. Anybody can produce a head of lettuce, but it's having a head of lettuce that looks nice, tastes nice, has a decent shelf life, makes you eat a salad and makes you want to go back to a salad. How many times do you go to a restaurant, have a meal, they stick you a side salad? How many people scrape that side salad off and it goes to waste? I'm a great believer in they should be eating that salad, as a meal. You tasted our salads. We have 7 different packs. Each one has got the flavours. Even you was amazed how spicy the spicy was. You know, and
he's not exaggerating. He's not exaggerating. I've been to a lot of vertical farms, and certainly some have, you know, people ask me, does hydroponics taste worse than soil-based farming? And I don't think so. I think it's about the grower. And Graham is one of the best, if not the best grower in the Middle East. So when I taste his product, it just ignites your senses. And that's the power of really, I think, the art of agriculture is and the willingness to kind of put the work in to focus on that quality. And it's very difficult to get to that stage, which is why I don't think that the internet fixes that problem. I think it's a combination of your profile and your style. And actually, you know, David, when we were recruiting for Teams for Food Justice or for Farm One, the previous company you worked at, that's what it was about. I could tell that you were a meticulous, detail-oriented person. And that's the profile I'm looking for, even though you didn't come from a hydroponics or agriculture background. So just a shout out to you there. But Khalid, you're back. You've arrived. Bonjour. You have to introduce yourself now, but first you have to unmute the plant charmer.
All right, perfect. Hi, my name is Khalid. I'm also called the plant charmer on, social media. I also run Ingenious Farms, which I founded a couple of years ago.
Bad connection, Khalid. Okay. We'll wait.
If Khalid is waiting for a moment, can I add something? Just what was just said?
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's something. Another question we were thinking about is what advice to give, and something that I've really learned, especially when I stepped into running my own small farm business, is I have the internet in my pocket now. I can search for what that disease is, what that bug is, the plant spacing. But for me, it's really vital to feel more connected to my community and go to a book if I have it, and really getting other farmers' phone numbers on my phone. And especially for me, it's important to ask older farmers and farmers that have been farming on the land where I am for a long time, because it's not just about getting that information and the spacing numbers and this and that. It's also about staying connected. And like you've talked about, Maurice, like I think the land recognizes that. And like Graham talked about, it's so much about the grower that's participating in that. And one of my favorite teachers in the US, Rowan White, talks about the song singers like to the seeds, and that wasn't just about getting the growing conditions right, but it was actually about your connection with the food, and with your community. So I just want to say that that's like a piece of advice that I try to give myself and to other growers, is to get especially older farmers' phone numbers on your phone, so that when you're in the field and you're freaking out and you want to cry, you can call them.
That's a good tip for you there. And it sounds like the secret life of plants is being talked about. I see Maurice Small laughing about that too. But Khalid, let's go back to you. I think your connection's back. So again, introduce us, tell us where you are.
All right, cool. Hey, what's up, Graham? Sorry. What's up, Henry? I'm actually in Montreal, Canada. I actually stepped out earlier because I wanted you guys to enjoy the nice weather, and then my connection cut off a bit. So I put myself on LTE now. So I'm the CEO and founder of Ingenious Farms. We're located in Laval, Quebec. We actually do vertical farming, but outdoors, as you're a bit familiar with what we do. So our focus is really getting as many people in as possible onto the local urban vertical farming thingy. I'm not talking about the farmers, I'm talking about the consumers. So we really focus a lot on low prices and low cost of production. So we're kind of the other end of the spectrum where people like Graham are attacking a bit more of a specific or technology, and we're all really going after the mass there. So if you actually look in the background, we're at my place right now, but if you look in the background, you'll see these, you're probably seeing those new prototypes we're coming out with. So we're always at work, and thank you for the invite, by the way. I really appreciate that. I had the wrong time zone in my telephone, so I thought you guys were like an hour ahead of what you really are.
No problem. We're happy you're here, but because you're late, I have to give you one of the controversial questions from our audience.
Please, I love controversy.
That's the consequence when you show up late for one of my panels. So the question is gene editing in agriculture. What's your opinion?
Gene editing, I think nature has a very, very good skill set of gene editing, and I think my smile tells you where I'm going with this. I think nature has done a great job. I think we can hybridize things. And I think that should be sufficient to what we need to achieve in agriculture. I think the other part of the technology that we need to kind of wrap our heads around or master is going to come from our brains. It's going to come from our techniques. And just like anything else, I mean, I think we've been very wasteful of the earth resources so far. Would it be the automobile industry or think about anything? I mean, all the plastic in the dumpsters and the landfills and all this. So like anything else, I think we need to just fine tune our approach. I think we need to realize our intelligence is our main, and I would also say our only asset. And we need to focus on that and then leave what nature has brought to us alone, because I think it can have very devastating consequences on the environment. And I think at this stage, it's not needed. We can create the masses and the volume and the quality needed just by using our intelligence, and I think we need to focus on that. So I mean, look, there's controversy, like you said, on that. I'm very clear on my opinions, and I think we can win this game just using what nature gave us, which is the genes in nature plus our intelligence, and that's a perfect match.
Well, thank you for that answer. Let's go over to Maurice again for a minute. Maurice, you know, we were talking about new farmers. We were talking about how they gain knowledge. We're talking about, you know, the history of agriculture and that ancient knowledge that we're trying to bring on board. But let's talk again about technology a little bit. One of the questions that came is hydroponics an easier way for a new farmer to get started? What do you think? You've worked in both a little bit. You've seen both. Is hydroponics easier?
I think that hydroponics is a medium to young people to expand the knowledge base of what it could be. Because young people spend a lot of time indoors, it's no big deal to go over to the hydro kit, the hydro wall, and, you know, putz around with the pH and the timing, like Graham said. There's so much more ease systems going into hydroponics. Outdoors, you have to deal with temperature, you have to deal with bugs, you have to deal with the two-legged, the four-legged bugs, the things that come and, you know, steal your items. As a result, I think that an intro to food is hydroponics. The raft system, the deep water culture system, anything vertical, stores, you can feed your family. It's really a good way to go. Outdoors, you have a lot more variables. However, when we teach, and I teach a lot of urban youth how to grow food, we always do both. So we have them tear up some front lawn lasagna their way up, and we also have them do something at home with about $150 of hydroponics with the stones and the pumps and things like that. And we utilize, what's it called, worm poop in the hydroponics, because a lot of the kids can't get organic food. And we're finding that over the past 10 years or so, we're finding that the worm poop is able to enhance that flavor that so many hydroponic growers don't have. So there's a lot of ways in which we can get into it. And by using the worm poop, we're able to complete the cycle because of the composting involved. So the cycle's complete outside and the cycle's complete inside.
Thank you for that. And I think it's a really good point that, you know, we can use these technologies to bring young people into the industry, expose them to agriculture, and help them understand that there are other ways to do it, that they don't have to end where they began. And I think that it as a gateway technology is certainly something that has been my experience as well. So we're getting so many questions from the audience. So let's keep going. I'm going to try and get to all of our amazing panelists to talk about it. Alyssa, you're going to come up next, and then Graham. But first, I'm going to ask Lydia a question. Lydia, you worked at Harlem Grown. This is a community-focused urban farm. It's got a soil-based lot and a hydroponic greenhouse. One of the questions that I asked is, what is the economic case for community gardening and community-focused urban agriculture? Is there an economic case for it?
Yeah, for sure. And it's been alluded to already. Right now, we're not seeing the actual cost of food. A lot of our food has been subsidized through fossil fuels, through technology, through conglomerates of ownership. So we don't actually see the cost of our food. You know, now I'm like eating fruits where they're grown rather than when I was in the Northeast of America eating something that was shipped in for miles and miles because it ships well. So I was writing about this and thinking, you know, I don't have this belief that we shouldn't eat anything from other places in the world. I just think that we should have a closer cost to what the real cost is, including the labor, including the shipping, including the fossil fuels, all of these things. So like David talked about, lessening the food miles just makes sense that it lessens the amount of resources that are going into it. So it's very easy to see, and I did this with my students in Harlem Grown, how closely connected those economics are when there aren't a bunch of middle steps between the producer and the consumer. And then when people realize I can grow my own food and then I don't have to pay for it as much at a store or at a restaurant, or I'm in a place, I use the term like food apartheid because it's food deserts, but they've been organized quite often to be that way. And so if people don't have access to that, then they can grow their own food. I think that's one of the biggest steps that needs to be taken and is being taken in food access, is access to knowledge and access to growing space. And so I don't take that lightly. You know, in New York City, like space is so vital and important and scarce, and it's hard for people to get that. And so I think it's something that we really need to, I almost used the word fight for, but support, and people having access to space to grow food and the resources to carry that knowledge on. I have seen students that at the beginning of like a 1 hour tour, not like weeks or months or years, a 1 hour tour that were saying, ew, gross, yeah, I don't want to touch that, I don't want to eat that, I would never eat that. And then at the end of it, they're the ones that are like dragging their teacher over, saying like, look at this compost, these like food scraps that I turned, and it's going to turn into dirt, and then we're going to grow these tomatoes, and you know what tomatoes are on? It's on pizza. And
it's so true. And you see that at Harlem Grown, you see that at Teams for Justice, but really community agriculture, or agriculture is focused on the people that need it the most. It unlocks the human potential. When you have community that you can talk about food, when you have that healthy food and your brain and your body works better because you're giving yourself the nutrients, you're actually able to unlock your potential. If we look at Teams for Justice, and you can go to their website, the children that are now being exposed and eating healthier food and bringing that healthier food back to their home, they're performing better on tests, they're attending school more often. And if every single human being has value, which they certainly do, it has potential, this is really about unlocking that and maximizing that in all of us. And that's why it's important. That's why even if that food is given away, even if that food is free, even if it's supported by donations, it does not matter that it doesn't have that profit incentive, because it does unlock the human potential that creates that economic development, that creates the future individuals that are going to transform something in their community and their society. You never know who's going to be the next, I'm trying to think of not a white person, Bill Gates, I don't know, someone who's inventing something amazing. You know, who's going to be that person, and what do they need to get there? Well, healthy food is a really good start. And if it's available to them and affordable to them, that's amazing. So let's get into supply chain. Alyssa, COVID-19, destructive, but also just showing how fragile our supply chain is in our food system. I mean, just really magnifying the fragility of it all. What's the role of urban agriculture in all of this? Does it help us adapt? Is it going to be the adaptation strategy? Have they been able to adapt faster? We're going to talk about how everybody's experiencing that in a little bit, but just, you know, generally speaking, what's the relation between urban agriculture and the supply chain?
Yeah, great question. The supply chain, you know, it's one of these buzzwords. I was talking to a friend the other day that I talk to a lot about food and ag issues, and he's like, so we'll just throw out the word supply chain because I'm always talking about it, probably not understanding enough to actually be talking about it myself. But when you look at where a lot of our food comes from, you know, it's not, if you actually go back and look at where it comes from, it's coming from thousands of miles away. I think the average dinner plate in the US travels something like 1,500 miles to get there. And so it's pretty crazy when you really think about it. And then the fact that when you are purchasing food from a local farmer's market or other kind of food that's grown in that area, you're typically paying more for it. And to me, it's a bit mind-boggling when you think about you're paying less for this apple from South America, or, you know, from Argentina or Chile than you are for this apple that was grown in Missouri and is in season. And so it gets really complicated, but part of the reason that is the way it is because the supply chain for the large agri-food system that's been set up is set up to deal with scale and with numbers and with harvesting before produce is actually ripe. And it's become this mathematical equation to get everything in the places they need at the exact right time. But one of the things that I think is actually coming to light, and is a good thing in some ways about COVID-19 and the pandemic that we're all dealing with, is people are suddenly realizing, wait, like this isn't like the holy grail of solutions. There's a lot of issues with it that just because we, as you know, many of us can go to the grocery store and we'll see stock shelves all the time and not see one single issue with our food supply system because we're used to like, oh, I can go to the grocery store and there's always an abundance of food and exactly what we need. But really, that is predicated upon so many issues deeper within the supply chain that are all sorts of both human right and environmental injustices that are starting to come to light with everything that's happening with COVID-19. I mean, I used to live next to the Smithfield meatpacking plant in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. I lived less than a mile away for about a year, which is one of the main meatpacking plants that's had a huge outbreak of COVID-19 right now. And you see the price of meat going up all over the US, and you see that so much of that is also on these minority communities that are growing our food. And so some of the breakdown of the supply chain that you're seeing right now is in some ways, I think, very much a good thing, because people are seeing that we need to build out our local supply chains. And right now, one of the reasons why food grown locally is more expensive is because there hasn't been an emphasis on building out those, you know, locally produced food, local food hubs. But I do see an opportunity now to get there because more people are buying CSA farm shares, more people are focusing on getting their food locally.
Yeah, I think it's really about those externalities. I think from an economic perspective, people are seeing the externalities of this risk associated with having a supply chain that's so far from the consumer. And it just reminds me of the video they showed me in middle school of David Suzuki talking about externalities, which is the term that economists have for aspects of the system that they can't quantify. But those things are starting to become more relevant now. And so I really hope that those externalities will go beyond just the risk associated with losing your supply chain to think about some of the elements you mentioned, like the environment, communities, equity, labor rights. The list goes on and on and on and on. Okay, Graham, I've got a bunch of vertical farming questions for you. I need you to answer them quickly. And then we're going to go into a lightning round for some questions for everyone else. So it's gonna be really fun. There's so many good questions coming in. Let's keep them coming. So Graham, let's start off with energy costs in vertical farming. Big question, but like, is it your biggest challenge? Is it the worst part of vertical farming? What's your statement about energy costs in vertical farming?
But that, again, there's a million answers to that, and I need about 2 days to answer that.
You have 2 minutes.
Gee, thanks.
I guess
I mean,
what's the rough percentage of your farm?
Yeah, but take it logically. I mean, it depends how you build the farm in the first place. There are so many. I mean, if you build a greenhouse, you've got a U factor of 5.8. If you build in a warehouse, you've got a U factor of 2.47. If you build an insulated warehouse, there's 4 different types of insulation. You can go down to a U factor of 0.21. So it costs me less to cool or less to heat if I have a U factor of 2.1. If I'm in a greenhouse at a U factor of 5.8, my cooling, my heating is horrendous. If you take Dubai, how can I grow in a greenhouse? We can cool a greenhouse 50 degrees, not a problem. How much energy are you using to cool that greenhouse? As fast as you cool it, you're heating it up. If you're using pad and fan and you're using water to cool it, then you're introducing humidity into the greenhouse. So then you've got to dehumidify the greenhouse, which costs you more energy. If you're growing inside an urban warehouse, a warehouse like we are, they say you've got LED lights, but my cooling is negligible because what does it cost me? Once it's cold, it's cold. It's like a refrigerator. Once it's cold, it's cold. It just ticks over. My power for my LEDs, I have to have efficient LEDs. I can have 24 watt LEDs and it can cost me 360 watts for one of our EBs. I can use a 40 watt LED and I only use 270 watts of energy. So I'm using a higher powered light, but I use less energy to grow the crop using a higher powered light. I can have a 20 watt light that gives me more light, more micromoles per square meter than a 24 watt light. We've just proved that today. I have a 24 watt light that gives me 156 micromoles. I have a 20 watt light that gives me 260 micromoles. Same distance, I only use 12 lights instead of 15 lights. So I'm getting more energy, it's all a matter of knowledge, but that comes from being a grower and knowing what the plants want. What does the plant look like? They've said what spectrum. The spectrum can look anything you like. This is where Morris will like me, because I have always said, you've heard me. We want the sunshine outside, inside. I don't care what Philips say. I don't care what Viola say. I don't care what Heliospecs say. I don't care what any LED company says. I can grow a red lettuce or a green lettuce outside. I want to be able to grow that under the same LED. It's not wasted energy. I don't get in a spaceship and go to the sun and go, hey, I'm in this postcode. Can you only send me far red and blue today because I'm changing crops? So why do I want to change LEDs? So you have to, if you have the right LED, you have a ballast. If that ballast is correct, it doesn't give heat off. If it doesn't give heat off, then you're reducing your cooling load. So all energy usage, I mean, I've been around the world like you have. I've been to Hong Kong, China, Japan, Canada, America, Ireland, Scotland, England, Bahrain. I've been all over. And some of the vertical farms I've seen, I've walked in and they said, what can we do? And I've said, open the door at that end, put a bulldozer at the other end and stop when it's all outside. They're just built horrendously wrong from the start. And of course it's costing too much energy. Of course the LEDs aren't right. If you haven't got that knowledge, that expertise, it's just not worth anything. And for me, there are too many experts, my favourite word, you know that, an X is a has-been and a pert is a waste of energy. So, anybody who calls herself an expert, no. Everybody needs to be very knowledgeable, but how many vertical farms, indoor farms, have you seen that have been built incorrectly and have closed down within 18 months, 2 years, because, oh, we can't earn the money, we can't do this, we can't do that. But it's because they're built wrong.
I think you're awesome, Graham, because
I was told to be very nice to the audience and the panelists. So you know me, Henry. That was a very turned down version.
that was very turned down. But what I'll say is some of the things I really loved about it was context matters. Your climate matters, right? If you're in the Middle East, you need to reconsider what's been done before and what maybe will work, considering that climate, the temperatures, the sun, et cetera. So while vertical farming may not make sense in some regions, in the Middle East, in certain parts of the Middle East, it starts to make a lot more sense. As
but why doesn't it though, Henry? Why doesn't it make sense anywhere else? If I'm in England, if you're in England and you're a grower, years ago, we used to have 4 seasons. Yeah, and you could predict. End of October in England, we got our first frost, full fair week. We got our first frost. January, it started to warm up. End of March, April, it come. End of May, June was the summer. Yeah, now it's so unpredictable. So again, if you're inside a warehouse and you're growing, I can give the plant the season that it requires.
Okay, I get that, Graham.
It has got. I mean, I come from
but here's the follow-up. Here's the follow-up question. Work with me here. So someone else from our audience wants to start a vertical farm in Germany, and they want to know how to start it and scale it up. Now, as you know, Germany has deeply subsidized local agriculture. Tell me how you can make a profitable vertical farm in Germany.
Same as you can make a profitable business anywhere. It's got to be run correctly. It's got to be started off correctly, and you've got to know the very basics of everything, like everybody else has said.
It's about competition. You're competing with soil-based agriculture. I understand that climate is changing. I don't know if Germany is having the same effects that the UK is, but there certainly is some change happening. And you're competing with subsidies.
Yeah, but you have to have, I mean, where I am now, Uns Farms, I mean, we deliver, in my opinion, beautiful tasting salads. And that's what people want. You can grow, if you grow it cheaply and it doesn't taste any good, what's the point of growing it cheaply? People will only buy it once and they won't come back. That doesn't make for a good business. You know, so your product has got to be good. Your branding has got to be right. You've got to be people want to walk into a shop and you see a brand. You can drive down the street, you see a McDonald's. If you're hungry, you'll eat a McDonald's. You know what you're getting. It doesn't matter if you don't like it, it's edible, you know what you're getting. I used to be called Mr. English because I never travelled until I was 40. So when I went
Which was last year.
Yeah, I wish. And I saw a McDonald's, I'd go and have a McDonald's. I wasn't keen on a McDonald's, but you know exactly what you're getting, it's edible. And that's what salad should be. You want to, wherever you are. Like, we transport salads and food all over the world, but it doesn't taste the same. Why don't we have a brand that is known?
You know, Graham, let's move on. So lightning round here. So you're going to start with the lightning round. I'm going to ask all of our panelists, short statement, one sentence, okay? If there was one thing you could change about the food system, what would it be, Graham?
How do you define the food system?
It could be any part of the food system. Maybe you want to make all farms indoors. Maybe
no. Then it's got to be transport and storage.
So what would be the one thing you changed? You can think about it. I'll come back to you. Who's ready? Who's ready? Alyssa, let's hear it.
I'm ready. My answer is we just need more people to be aware of where their food comes from. I think people actually know the realities of
awareness.
Yeah, it would make a difference.
Awesome. Who's up next? David.
Yeah, basically the same thing. Food education, bridging the knowledge gap. We're a generation disconnected, many of us.
Maurice. Reaching for the phone.
I gotta say,
yeah,
I want everybody to grow their own food.
Everyone should grow some of their own food. I love that, or all of it if you can. It's Lydia.
Yeah, I'm You would totally expect my answer, but I'm gonna have to go with the intersection of social change, that we all have equal access to food space and food production knowledge.
Alex.
Yes, grow your own and also put more money, bigger part of your money in the food.
Yeah, that's definitely mine too. Just take an extra minute at the store and pay for quality, pay for local, pay for independent, support your farmers. That was one of the questions, is what can consumers do? I think we've answered that one as well. I think we can all agree with that. So support local farmers, support independent farmers. That's that one. Okay, Khalid, your turn. What would you change?
What I would change is access. Access is the holy grail of becoming Planet 2.0. As you've mentioned before, I think it's very, very, very lucid observation. It reaches down, to every aspect of our lives. Would it be the education of children? I mean, future engineers, future geniuses will come from that. Maybe we'll make it to the sun. Who knows? I'm just kidding. We won't make it to the sun, but we'll do much better that way. And access has been the number one thing that has held back, one, the development of humanity, and two, the development of this industry. That's it. I mean, the bigger pie, the total addressable market, is a concept that's very valid still today.
Thank you. Graham, okay, you ready? You know the game?
Well, Khalid, if, like Donald Trump said, we could go to the sun on a night, we'd be all right.
What? Wait, what did you say?
If we went to the sun and we did it on a night time, we'd be all right, surely.
Oh, okay, I got you. Okay, so let's...
Yeah, I mean, people have to have local food. I disagree with Morris, where he says everybody grows their own. Hell, I'm out of business if everybody grows their own. So thank you, Morris, for that one. I like you. Nice one.
We've got the rebel and the capitalist here. Okay, so I'm just going to answer one of the questions from the audience. One of them was about architects, right? How can architects integrate urban farming? I think Alex might have some thoughts on this, but this is one I'm particularly passionate about. When I first started exploring urban agriculture, one of the main reasons I got into it was because architects, developers, and city planners didn't understand the differences between soil-based farms, rooftop farms, greenhouses. And so when they're designing it, they have this canvas and they have no idea how to match things. And so what they end up doing is they end up designing beautiful things, and then they pitch it to their client, and their client's like, well, how much is it going to cost? How much is it going to produce? Is there another way to do it? And they have no idea, and they get anxious, and they basically ditch it. So there's many, many projects that are beautiful urban farms in the design, and then when it's built, at best, it's a green roof or a couple of different containers with a garden, and we need to change that. So one of the things that Agritecture try to do is we're trying to empower these architects to understand the data and the trade-offs. We've actually built a software product to do that. I will put it in the chat. It's basically a design tool where you can estimate the yields of greenhouses and vertical farms, container farms online. So if you just need some early information, it's one way to do that. Alex, do you have any more thoughts on that?
Yes, I totally agree with you. And they can use your system online to imagine a good way to produce on their building, but they have to ask to some guys that have knowledge like you or me to help them. And I'm doing that today and also tomorrow. I have a lot of to do because yes, architects like to make it nice with a lot of farming and a lot of plants on the building in 3D effects, but the result is very bad sometimes, many times. And I'm here to help them. Yeah. And
yeah.
It's the same questions that we speak about. Do you can learn farming very fast? The answer is no, because you can learn some information, but if you don't practice, you don't a farmer. You are only a student. And if you practice, you know, and if you grow your own food, you can pay the good price for your food. And it's why I think everybody should grow their food. And after they will buy a lot of local food, because they know how it's difficult to grow and to produce food, and how is the true taste of honey, of meat, of lettuce, and they will pay the price to find this very good quality.
Thank you for that. So, Thought for Food is a global organization, and so we're getting some global questions here with our global panel. I'll say global one more time just for the fun of it. But anyway, so one of the questions is urban agriculture in Africa, okay? So we've got a question about how you can do urban farming, or in Cameroon. I can pull up the temperature of Cameroon in a moment, or you can look at yourself. But I think it's an interesting question in general, talking about communities that are typically less privileged than many of us on this call, and understanding how urban agriculture historically and how currently has a role in those communities. So what I'll say is that there's a couple of examples that I can bring up that might inspire you. One of them is an organization called Shadouf. I will try to spell it in the chat. It's based out of Cairo, Egypt. And what they do is they convert individuals' unused rooftops into hydroponic farms, not dissimilar from yours, Khalid, kind of A-frame style ones. And then they provide a service where they maintain it and take some of the harvest. So they have about 110 rooftops in Cairo that they manage, which is pretty impressive last time I checked. It's a difficult system because they have to actually move between all these farms. Obviously the farms are not at scale. There's various challenges with that, but distribution in some ways is a benefit because it's closer. Now that's obviously North Africa, very different from other parts of Africa. If we move to Ghana, we had a client, it was actually our first client in Africa, and she had won a World Bank grant to develop some hydroponics. And what's interesting in Ghana is that actually the road infrastructure is so bad that even though the country can grow a lot of local food, to get to the main capital city, the roads are so bad they can't transport the food properly to the customers. So that's why they're trying to grow some of these products like leafy greens that don't store properly closer to the consumer. So we had to find a vacant lot and develop some kind of low-tech systems for hydroponics. One of the most difficult challenges was dealing with humidity and temperature in that region. And that's going to be difficult across the region as you have some very extreme temperatures there. So you're really looking for low-cost solutions. You're looking for being as close as possible to your customer. And I think you're really going to have to find a lot of collaboration with your community itself to support it, to advocate for it, to support your product, among other challenges. But definitely, I think it's going to be more of a distributed solution as opposed to at scale, kind of larger urban farming solutions. That's my take. And Africa is very large, so not to be too general. Any other thoughts from our experts about urban farming in Africa? Yeah, Lydia.
I would love to say one thing about, I just spent a little bit of time outside of Nairobi in Kenya. So again, yeah, its own country with its own issues and strengths as far as farming goes. And one thing that I would totally tell to any person in an African country that is looking to these places like the US, like Germany, like the Netherlands, because I heard that quite often there, that the political officials were saying, oh, we should be like the US as far as agriculture goes. And me, as a person that's really working to change the food system, was like, no. And hoping that we can create a system that's like worth replicating as far as responsibility and regenerative ag goes. And so one thing that I would really tell anyone is to be really aware of getting connected to middle folks who are going to profit off of your knowledge and your growing, because yeah, that can become very exploitative in food chains and food supply chains. And so everything we've been talking about here, like getting to know the people who are actually buying the food that you're growing, getting to know the people who are actually eating it, feeding one another's communities first. Something that the farmers were doing there was taking away some of the like large scale estates that they had had in monoculture in non-native crops like coffee and tea, and returning to a biodiverse, more of a farmstead. And you had tons of little farms tucked into smaller spaces, but the amount of food that they were able to produce for their families and for one another was incredible and completely inspiring, coming from a place where, like you said, I almost am like drowning in resources at points and don't know where to choose. So
yeah, I think that's a really amazing message about also like how much is possible in small spaces. Even if you look in Asia, you know, I saw some estimates that about 50% of households grow some of their own food. They use it for bartering and trading. These are some things we can learn about as well. I was talking to someone in Canada recently. They're launching sovereignty gardens in Ontario, kind of to remind us of the victory gardens as an approach to that, and kind of empowering actually master gardeners with the ability to grow more food instead of roses and beautiful flowers like they typically do. Some really interesting strategies there as well. Any other thoughts on Africa before we move on? I've never been, but my father was born in Kenya, just a quick fact. Go ahead.
Am I on? I'm not really sure about the whole Zoom thing, so I'm not sure whether I'm actually on or not.
You're on, we hear you.
All right, cool. Look, one quick thought about that. Again, this is always my kind of my line of thought on that. But I mean, before you solve the end of the problem, you got to start with the beginning. And it's always about cost and the speed at which you can deploy systems and how efficient they are. And at the end of the day, this whole low production cost gives you the flexibility to just do what you want with the product, really. I mean, at that point, once you got a low cost, you don't really need to know what you're going to do with it. You know it's going to be useful. So in Africa, you can't, in my opinion, you can't go with indoor farms that are going to produce lettuce that cost $10 a kilo to produce. So as opposed to that, you can use low-cost systems like we use on my farm, for example. And our obsession, it's not even a goal, it's literally an obsession, is lowering the cost to include everybody as much as possible. And also the side benefit would be to actually be able to deploy in countries which have less resources than we do.
I agree. Lots of challenges there, but also opportunities. You know, it's also really interesting how, this is just a more general statement, how many countries are now recolonizing Africa for agriculture to export that food. I think that's a really interesting and difficult situation that's happening, whether it's China or the Middle East, that are finding the arable land, making investments that are creating jobs, but extracting the product from the land to only bring it back again. It's really the cycle of humanity and the lack of humanity that keeps happening. So let's talk about, let me see what questions we got here. Amazing. You know, if any of our panelists want to put their social media in the chat to get some followers, feel free to do that, and make sure that if you're follow some amazing Instagram accounts, or just put the name of your organization in there as well. I'm sure TFF will be promoting this afterwards as well. So let's go into, we talked about Dubai a little bit. Let's talk about compost. Maurice, this is a good one for you as well. I'll put that on the chat, Khalid. So Maurice, this is a question. Are you seeing urban farming models incorporating co-compost made with human waste? Is there a future to include sanitation with sustainable agriculture? So essentially this is the idea of making use of the abundance of human waste on Earth, which has some value for plant production. And is there a way to use that for agriculture? What are some of the challenges with that? Maurice, let's start with you. You're all about compost. Maurice Small's Twitter is all about compost. It's always soil, worms, compost. It's beautiful. Go ahead, Maurice.
Thanks, Henry. There's a movement around the country, and the movement is to do the humanure for a couple years. And when the humanure is done for a couple years, we put it into a perennial bed. And after a couple years in the perennial bed, we remove the perennials, divide the perennials, sell said perennials to local garden clubs, and then we're able to, after those number of years, begin to use that soil again, because the worms are always moving through it. So we're giving it about 5 years, the humanure, to go through a system. And in the meantime, we're getting up beautiful perennials, beautiful pollinators, beautiful butterfly plants, beautiful bee plants. And then it comes back to us again after it's been through this entire cycle for about 5 years, back into our food system. There is no waste, and we can look at humanure as being an asset. A number of farmers here in Atlanta, not a number, but about 5 farmers are using experimental plots with humanure. And they're also using their urine to fertilize different test crops. So these crops aren't being sold to the public. They're only on farm to be tested by the farmer and his or her family. So the use of our poo and our pee, I think is necessary. I don't know if it's necessary to the point of having it every day, you know, right in there. I don't think so. But I do think that in the future, in about 10 years, we'll be able to embrace it because it is a waste product. And a number of municipalities are researching the use of different types of manures to heat our buildings, to heat our greenhouses. And I don't think it should be wasted and just go away, become, you know, nothing. I think we need to put it back into use. We do eat it, and there are different organisms like black fly, soldier larvae that can consume it as well. So it's a topic that is hidden, and whoever asked that question, you know, contact me after, because that's a large way in which we can begin to 100% return everything back to the earth.
Yeah, I think that's some really good specific examples. And actually that use of the perennials is not one I'd heard before. You know, there's some, you know, kind of psychological issues with people getting food that was made from human waste, or at least partially made from human waste. People need to get over that. There's also, you know, studies that show that because of the chemicals we eat and the prescription drugs we take, that's actually not a good thing to consume through the food. But by creating this multi-step process to use worms, to use what the soil can do, that's how you make it safe. That's how you can avoid that. And I think that's a really, really good answer. That's awesome. Okay, let's see what else here. Okay, let's get into some final points, some final talking points. We've got 74 participants here right now, 74 enthusiasts, curious people about urban agriculture. Lydia's waving at you. So let's go around, and I want you to give a call to action, each of you, okay? What is your call to action to the audience? What do you want them to do? What do you want them to take away? And we will have time for all of you to do it. Who wants to go first? Raise your hand. Well, my call to action is really the same one as earlier. Literally, just when you're at the store and you're looking at your product, or when you're on your phone and you're ordering your deliveries, or when you're shopping for anything, just think about what you're voting for. And this is a reminder to myself as well. I'm certainly not perfect. Try to take an extra moment to think about it, but especially in the context of food. When you spend that money, when you spend that euro, that dollar, that real, you are voting with it. You're saying, I support this, I want more of this. And in some ways, that action is even more powerful than when you vote at the voting booth. So please just take an extra moment and think about that in the food system. It's really powerful, and it will start to shift your awareness. It's a reminder to all of us. Call to action. Who's up next?
I'll go kind of.
Oh, Alyssa, go ahead.
Oh,
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, Khaled. I was going to say, seconding the kind of voting with your money, but going back to my point before, just educating yourselves, whether it be just looking at where your banana's from, or where your produce or packaging, anything. Just educate yourself and take that time when you're purchasing food.
Thank you so much. And there's so many resources. If you look through the chat, we put, you know, the accounts. I mean, some of these people have really amazing accounts where you can learn about the facts, what they're doing on a daily basis. Alex has so many resources in French if you speak French. Maurice has the Plant Charmer has almost 100,000 followers, by the way. So he's like a boss urban farmer. By the way, respect for that, Khalid. But anyway, go ahead. What's your shout out? You'll learn Zoom. You know Instagram, but you'll learn Zoom eventually.
Yeah, I will. I'm pretty sure I will. I'm usually a pretty fast learner. I don't know what's going on today. But look, my call to action is going to second yours, but a bit from a different angle. Now, people will say vote with your dollars, and then the counter argument to that will be, yeah, but it's more expensive, right? So, and in a way it is, but in another way it's always going to be, unless people actually buy these things, because you know what? In a free market economy, scale brings volume, which actually lowers production costs. So I'm actually, as you know, and as you guys are starting to get my theme here, I really want to make it super cheap. But when I go to the store myself, I actually pay top dollar for local stuff, because I understand not everybody has the zeal that I have, or not everyone has the chance that I have to have made those prices low or whatever. And these guys that I buy things from, which sell for what we could call expensive, are part of that future system. We all work together. So basically, I have it for cheap now, but down the line they will as well if we give them some money to actually work and stop giving it to people who put chemicals everywhere. So it's kind of like a group of people who one day will actually interconnect a lot more than we do now. But in order to do that, these people need resources. So it really is a vote with your dollars, much more than it looks like on the surface. There's this whole ecosystem in the back that is fighting tooth and nail for you guys. Like you wouldn't believe. I mean, there's guys like Henry who brings us all together, but there are so many small elements. So when I go to the bakery, I take, yeah, good, awesome. So when we go to the bakery, we take the nice baguette from the artisan, baker or whatever. Maybe now it's expensive, but later on, he's actually going to be able to, kind of integrate in this environment. So yeah, a lot more than you guys think.
Yeah.
Vote with your dollars, put the money where it matters.
Yeah, think about computers, how cheap they are now. Imagine if we could do that for local food. So Graham, let's go to you.
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody should buy local where they can, but you've got to make sure that you buy pesticide free. I mean, I've never used chemicals for, at least 15, 20 years. Never used chemicals. Don't see the point in it if it's down to husbandry. Even if you're in soil or in a greenhouse, if your hygiene is correct, that's half your battle. Keep your weed, if you hand weed, keep your weeds away. There's nowhere for pests to go. Make sure you've got good plants that attract the ladybirds and things like that to eat any bugs and stuff like that. But, don't use pesticides. Buy local, support your local grower.
You get one. Those are all good, but you're done.
Got to have
no pesticides. Alex, you're up, quickly.
Yes. Just
love you, Graham.
Start to farm if you have a bullshit job. Start to farm if
that bullshit grows good plants.
A bullshit job, because you need farmers and you don't have enough farmers. That's the big difference between 2020 and 50 years in the past. We had a lot of more farmers.
I can remember both.
And we need more farmers.
We need more
farmers. Not too much, because Graham and me need money, but
Lydia, you're up next. What's up?
Mine's a written out thing. I'm just going to read it off.
Okay.
Grow something, anything, eat what you grow, feed people, look to elders and traditional wisdom, reconnect to the land, think about ecosystems more than productivity and connection over profit, organize, demonstrate, stand up and speak out, plant a seed, and remember to hope.
Manifesto in the house. Maurice, your turn.
I gotta say that the most important piece of a call for action is, I saw something last night on Twitter where the demonstrators were picking up trash and taking it away. We got to think about zero waste. We have to think about where stuff is going. It's got to go somewhere. How are we consuming? How are we processing what we consume? And where is it going? It's got to go somewhere. I'm looking for the engineers, the scientists, the architects. How are we taking our environment and doing something else with it besides throwing it away? Zero waste.
Thank you for that, Maurice. Zero waste. Good message for all of us. David, what do you think?
Well, if you're not involved, then get involved. And if you're already involved, then teach others your skills. Teach others how they can also get involved. Like Lydia and others have said already, we stand on the shoulders of giants. I know that I owe everything to my mentors, and agriculture technology was not invented overnight by one person. This is a collaborative effort, and we're all sharing this planet. So our efforts should add value back to society.
Thank you for that, David, as well. So I'm humbled by all of you. I'm grateful to Thought for Food for organizing this. I'm grateful for all of you for taking the time out to do this together. I'm feeling rejuvenated. I'm feeling inspired. I'm having a rough day, but it's getting so much better seeing all of you. So to wrap up, we're gonna make a statement, okay? So I'm just gonna put it in the chat. You're all gonna unmute, and we're gonna say this together, okay? So on 3, do y'all see it? Unmute, 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 all the panelists. Okay, so on 3, 2, 1, we're gonna say these 3 statements. 3, 2, 1. No farmers,
farmers,
no
No
food,
farmers,
no future.
future.
No future.
Well,
No
the
future.
internet connection could have been better, but you get the idea.
That's a charm of the internet. We get a bit of a different flag everywhere.
I love you all. Make sure you're following these amazing people. Have a good day and spread kindness and love and eat local. Take care, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Henry.
Bye,
Thank
everyone.
you. Have a great
Bye.
day
Thank you.
or evening.